I guess you could say I wrote my own severance package. They just didn't know they were signing it until the day they fired me. My name's Caleb Whitaker. I used to be their indispensable machine learning specialist. Now they pay me a 5-figure monthly licensing fee just to keep their precious supply chain AI from seizing up like a rusted tractor. It wasn't always that way. 3 years ago, I was just another contract hire, another overqualified, underpaid consultant with too many unpaid invoices and a LinkedIn profile that read like a crime scene. My specialty was last-mile logistics optimization, routing algorithms that shaved fuel costs and labor hours so companies could squeeze another quarter point for shareholders while pretending to care about carbon emissions. I didn't come in with big dreams. I came in with a half-broken Toyota and ulcer and a willingness to work late if they left me alone. But they didn't leave me alone. They had an optimization system so bad it might as well have been flipping coins. Orders got lost in dead zones. Drivers wasted hours on redundant runs, and their fuel budget was so bloated, even the CFO had questions. Enter me. I told them I could fix it. They didn't care how. Just make it work. So I did. Not for them, let's be clear, but for me. Because while they saw a patch job, I saw an experiment. I spent my nights in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, half-eaten General Tso's on the desk building something elegant. A self-calibrating prediction engine with continuous learning. It was the culmination of 5 years of trial and error, dozens of scrapped prototypes, and an unhealthy relationship with black coffee. And it was mine. Legally mine too. That's the part they forgot. See, my consulting contract had an IP carve-out for pre-existing intellectual property and derivative works. Boilerplate they never bothered to read. Or maybe they did and just assumed it was lawyer fluff I'd never enforce. They were used to people needing them. Used to the leverage of a steady paycheck and the fear of being unprofessional. They weren't used to people like me. The day I deployed the first beta of my algorithm to their servers, it was a mess. Spit out routes that looked like toddler scribbles. But I kept iterating. Quietly. They didn't know how to read my code, so they didn't ask questions. By month 4, the model was predicting real-time traffic shifts better than Google. Warehouse load balancing so smooth it made the VP of Ops look like a visionary. They loved it. Until they didn't need me anymore. That's the thing about consultants. You're either the savior or the cost-cutting target. There's no middle ground. I kept every version on encrypted storage. My own keys. My LLC's cloud account. They didn't even think to audit it. They thought production deployment meant hours. They thought wrong. I still remember my badge hitting the bottom of the HR collection box. A dull plastic clack that felt so final at the time. Michelle from HR tried her best funeral parlor smile. We really appreciate everything you've done, Caleb. Unfortunately, the project-based role is ending now that we're fully operational. Fully operational on my code. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I signed the exit papers with their cheap ballpoint pen, the one that barely worked unless you gouged the page a few times. And I walked out with nothing but a stale travel mug of coffee and overdrawn checking account, and the knowledge that they just handed me leverage on a silver platter. Because the system they depended on needed one thing to keep running. A renewal key. My key. Encrypted, time-limited. When they fired me, they didn't just remove the consultant. They removed the only person who could generate the next activation token. And I didn't feel angry. Anger is hot and loud. What I felt was colder. Focused. A kind of clarity you only get after your 5th cup of burnt break room coffee. And your last illusion that companies care about you dies quietly under the fluorescent lights. Because this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was accounting. And if you've ever been replaced by a cheaper smile, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more to go. They didn't hire me because they respected me. They hired me because they were bleeding money, and I was the cheapest tourniquet they could find. That's the thing about being a consultant in this industry. They don't want to partner with you. They want to rent your brain, wring it dry, then dump you before they have to pay benefits. When they first called, I was between gigs. If between gigs means living on black coffee and instant noodles, avoiding calls from my landlord and rewriting my resume so it didn't sound like a corporate crime scene. My last full-time role ended with a workforce rebalancing email that arrived at 5:47 p.m. on a Friday. I didn't even get a call. Just a locked account and a PDF explaining how valuable my contributions had been. So yeah, I was available. I remember the interview vividly, if only because it was the first time I'd sat in an office that smelled like desperation more than mine did. Their CTO looked like he hadn't slept in days. The ops VP kept checking his phone like it owed him money. They presented the problem with all the subtlety of a hostage video. Look, we're hemorrhaging cash on routing mistakes. Clients are complaining about missed delivery windows. Drivers hate us. Fuel costs are off the charts. I didn't even blink, because this wasn't my first dying horse. I asked them to show me their existing optimization model. They handed me a laptop with a dashboard so clunky it could have been designed in PowerPoint by an intern with a head injury. Their algorithm was a set of hard-coded rules that didn't adapt to weather traffic driver availability, or even which warehouses were actually stocked. I kept my face neutral. Consultants know that look on an executive's face, the one that says we can smell your desperation, but we'll pretend it's an opportunity for synergy. I didn't care. I needed the work. We spent an hour dancing around rates, contract duration, scope. They lowballed me twice, and I accepted. Not because I'm a pushover, but because I wanted in. They thought they were buying my time. What they didn't know was that I was buying access. I made sure to get one thing in writing: an IP carve-out clause. Pre-existing intellectual property and derivative works remain property of the consultant. Their in-house counsel barely read it. Boilerplate. They didn't realize derivative works meant anything I built on top of my own code. That clause was the difference between selling myself and renting them my mind. Of course, no one in the room cared. They just wanted someone to fix their mess. The CTO practically shook my hand off. "Welcome aboard. We need you live ASAP." I nodded, smiled, but in my head I was already drawing the lines. They gave me an access badge that looked like it had been reprinted a dozen times. The picture quality was so bad I looked like a ghost. Fitting. The first day I walked through their office with my sad little badge and a disposable coffee cup that leaked if you squeezed it too hard. The receptionist didn't even look up. Their Slack was a graveyard of half-finished threads and passive-aggressive emoji reactions. The team was 3 junior data analysts, one of whom still thought CSV was an advanced encryption format. I knew then what they didn't. They didn't need a team. They needed me. And that's exactly what they were going to get, but not in the way they expected. They gave me a login to their ancient dev environment, some Frankenstein's monster of unpaid AWS bills and folders with names like Final, Really, Final, V7. It was like archaeology, but the civilization had died from bad version control. I spent my first week just cataloging their code. No one else even tried to understand it. They treated me like IT support. "Hey Caleb, can you fix this error? Caleb, any way to make this faster? Caleb, why doesn't it work? Because you wrote it with duct tape and hope." I didn't say that out loud. I smiled, gave them the nod, and started writing. But not for them. For me. Because while they thought they were onboarding a contractor, I was onboarding their entire infrastructure into my head. Every meeting was a performance. I'd sip their bitter break room coffee, nod along while they blamed each other for why the system was failing. Ops pointed at Dev. Dev blamed sales. Sales blamed market conditions. No one blamed themselves. Meanwhile, I sat there quietly writing out my plan on the back of my old grocery receipts. Because I wasn't there to save them. I was there to build something they couldn't replace. Something they wouldn't even understand. And when I was done, they wouldn't own it. They'd lease it. From me. They didn't even know what they were asking for. That was the first thing I realized when I actually dug into their routing system. They thought they needed optimization. What they really needed was triage. Their existing model wasn't a model at all. It was a set of if-then statements, duct-taped into a spaghetti ball of outdated shipping zones and fuel surcharges from 2014. It had no understanding of weather traffic, road closures, driver shifts, warehouse stock levels, client SLAs, or even daylight savings time. It was the kind of thing you'd find in a sophomore computer science project and think, at least they tried. But they were using it to move millions in freight. I didn't tell them that. You learn fast in consulting that honesty is only valuable if you bill by the hour for it. Instead, I said I see opportunities. They gave me a tiny cubicle between a printer that jammed twice an hour and a window that rattled when the HVAC kicked on. I didn't complain, because all I needed was access. I spent my first month doing quiet reconnaissance. I built system maps on the back of old grocery receipts. I took home anonymized data samples to stress test ideas. Every night was the same routine microwave dinner, black coffee, and a text editor full of half-built functions. My apartment looked like an evidence locker. Whiteboards, sticky notes, printouts of routing data with red ink slashed across them like a crime scene investigation. They never asked what I was doing after hours, because they didn't care. As long as the daily error rate dropped, they were happy to forget I existed. Perfect. About 6 weeks in, I built the first prototype. It was rough, but it worked. A real-time adaptive routing model that actually learned as new data came in. Self-correcting. It was smart enough to figure out if the truck fleet was short-staffed in Chicago on Mondays, or if the I-95 construction was going to blow up delivery times for 2 weeks. It wasn't flashy. It was practical. It was mine. When I finally showed it to them, they acted like I'd conjured it out of thin air. The CTO actually clapped. He didn't even understand half the metrics on the dashboard, but he liked the green arrows and downward-sloping arrow lines. The VP of Ops called it game-changing in a Slack thread he forgot to invite me to. I wasn't offended. I preferred it that way. They asked how I'd done it. I gave them the corporate-friendly version. Oh, just some tweaking, parameter tuning. They nodded like they understood. No one asked for the code base. No one asked who owned it. They just wanted it in production. I insisted on one thing: a pilot project designation in the ticketing system. They didn't even blink. Sure, pilot. Anything to make the board stop yelling about fuel overages. That designation mattered more than they knew, because their contract stated that pilot projects were exempt from full procurement review until promotion to production. And guess who controlled the promotion? Me. That meant no asset registration, no legal review, no vendor onboarding, no IP transfer paperwork, no procurement forms. Just my code running under my terms with a small note in the ticket system that read, "Pilot. Review pending." I made sure to close every ticket with that phrase, "Audit proof." Of course they didn't notice. They were too busy celebrating their transformation. They were hosting lunch and learns with the sales team about our new cutting-edge AI optimization. I sat in the back of those meetings with a leaky coffee cup listening to them promise clients a 15% reduction in delivery windows and 20% fuel savings. They didn't know how it worked. They didn't care. They just wanted to sell it. And me, I just kept taking notes. Every bug fix I made, I kept a changelog on my personal drive. Every model checkpoint, every training dataset snapshot, every tuning parameter replicated to my own cloud storage. Encrypted, backed up in triplicate. Registered under Whitaker Analytics LLC, because I wasn't building this for them. I was building it for me. They thought I was a contractor. I was a vendor. They just hadn't realized it yet, and they wouldn't until they tried to make me redundant. Because that's the thing about systems no one understands. They're not yours just because you paid someone to install them. They're only yours if you know how to keep them alive. And I hadn't taught them that part. Not yet. They say experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. Well, I'd had plenty of experience. Before this contract, I'd been burned enough times to smell the smoke before anyone else did. Startups that promised equity but delivered layoffs. Corporations that made me sign NDAs so thick you could use them as a doorstop, then tried to claim every line of code I'd ever written, even the ones that weren't for them. I'd had managers who saw intellectual property as a buffet line. If you built it on their time, theirs. If you built it on your time, also theirs apparently. If you protested, we'll find someone else. So when I took this contract, I didn't come in naive. I came in armored. The first thing I did before I even touched their data, I re-upped the registration on Whitaker Analytics LLC. Cost me $9.99 with the state. Best insurance policy I ever bought. I kept the paperwork in a black folder with a post-it on the front. Do not forget who owns this. Every piece of code I used was developed in my own environment. I didn't check it into their repo. I didn't build it on their VPN. I used my personal machine, my cloud credits, my encryption keys. They never noticed, because they didn't care. They were too busy yelling at each other over missed delivery windows and driver churn to ask how I was getting results. Their contract with me had an IP clause most people skipped over. Consultant retains rights to pre-existing intellectual property and derivative works. Most consultants don't use it. They don't even notice it, because they're desperate to keep the gig. I wasn't. I was desperate not to get stolen from again. So every time I improved the model, every new function, every hyperparameter tuning script, every validation data set, it went into my LLC's private cloud. Encrypted 3 ways. Backed up in multiple regions. I even printed key architectural diagrams on archival paper and stuffed them in a fireproof box. Paranoid. No. Experienced. Because I'd learned one thing in this business. Companies don't want to pay for talent. They want to own it. They want to turn you into a permanently on-call knowledge base with no equity, no credit, and no exit. I didn't hate them for it. That's just the game. But I wasn't going to lose this round. I remember one night in particular. It was 2 a.m. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and a splitting headache from staring at training loss graphs all night. I just finished another major improvement real-time fleet load balancing. It wasn't in the original scope. I didn't tell them about it. I saved it to my private repo. I signed it under my LLC. Then I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair and laughed. Because it was so simple. They'd never even asked me who owned the code. They just assumed. Like they always did. A week later, the CTO told me, "Just push it live, Caleb. Whatever you did last time worked. Don't worry about all the paperwork." I smiled. Sure, no problem. They loved being able to point at the new dashboard. Green metrics, better margins, clients happier, investors pacified. All because I quietly upgraded the brain of their system while they slept. And they didn't even pay for it. Not yet. Every improvement made them more dependent on me. They just didn't realize it. They thought they were buying a tool. But a tool is only as good as the person who can fix it. I documented everything. Detailed change logs, version histories, encryption keys, the licensing terms I was drafting in a separate folder titled Future Leverage, because I knew how this ended. I'd seen it before. The thank you meeting with HR, the locked accounts, the badge tossed in the collection box, and then months later the panicked call when something broke and no one else knew how to fix it. Except this time it wouldn't be a call asking for help. It would be a request for a license, because the algorithm wasn't just good. It was essential, and I was the only one who held the keys. I wasn't planning revenge. I was writing an insurance policy. I closed the black folder with the LLC papers, set it gently in my drawer, and turned out the light. I slept well that night, because I wasn't naive anymore. I was prepared. It's funny. You can spend your entire adult life getting good at something no one understands, and watch them clap for it anyway, so long as it makes them money. That's what launch day felt like. They called it Go Live like it was some holy event. They decorated the break room with streamers from the dollar store. Ordered 2 party-sized pizzas. Somebody brought in a balloon arch that sagged before noon. I sat at my borrowed desk, fingers wrapped around a cheap styrofoam coffee cup, watching the ops team run final checks. My dashboard lit up green across the board. Route prediction accuracy was up. Fuel costs projected to drop 17%. Delivery windows tightened by 22%. Numbers that made even the CFO stop pacing. They couldn't even explain why it worked. Which was perfect, because explaining it would have meant understanding it. And understanding it would have meant realizing they didn't own it. I remember the CTO patting me on the shoulder. "Caleb, you're a lifesaver." Then immediately asking me to leave the boardroom before the investors joined the call. Because that's how it works. You're the miracle worker until the cameras show up. Then you're the help. They demoed my dashboard on a giant screen, walking the board through metrics they barely understood. Real-time adaptive routing, machine learning optimization, buzzwords they tripped over like drunks on ice. But the numbers looked good. That's all they needed. Green arrows, sloping lines, money saved. No one asked how, or who built it. At one point, the VP of Ops said, "We've developed this cutting-edge model in-house with our talented team." I was literally 20 feet away sipping burnt coffee. I didn't correct him, because it wasn't worth the breath. They didn't mention me in the investor update, or the press release, or the internal newsletter. I didn't get a bonus, or even a decent lunch, just a generic email. Thanks to everyone for their hard work on this critical initiative. Everyone. I walked by a printed copy of the press release in the hallway later. Big headline. Company name launches proprietary AI logistics platform. Proprietary. That word made me laugh, because I knew exactly what it meant to them. It meant they thought it was theirs. Meanwhile, I kept my own records. I printed my dashboard reports and stuffed them into my black folder with the LLC papers. I emailed myself copies of every changelog. I made sure my personal repo was updated and encrypted. They were so busy celebrating that they didn't notice the fine print I'd left in the ticketing system. Pilot designation, meaning it wasn't production ready in legal terms, meaning no procurement approval, meaning no asset transfer, meaning they didn't own it, but they didn't see that. They were too busy high-fiving each other for saving the quarter. The CTO gave an all-hands talk about our culture of innovation. I sat in the back lanyard around my neck like a leash and sipped coffee that tasted like ash. And I waited, because I knew how this went. They'd get their photo ops, their investor praise, their stock uptick. And once they felt safe, once they thought the problem was solved for good, they'd look at me and think, why are we still paying him? That's how it always worked. So I kept my head down, smiled in meetings, pushed updates quietly, logged every improvement in my personal changelog, made sure my LLC's cloud storage was current. Because their biggest mistake wasn't underpaying me. It wasn't ignoring me. It wasn't even taking credit. Their biggest mistake was thinking they could replace me without consequences. They were too busy polishing their success story to realize I'd built a fuse into their miracle. And the clock was already ticking. I left that day with my badge still working, my laptop in my backpack, and their entire logistics lifeline humming quietly in production. Waiting, because I didn't need them to thank me. I just needed them to depend on me. They always do it on a Friday. It's practically an HR tradition. Give you the weekend to cool off. Limit the damage. Avoid the scene. I'd seen it before. Hell, I'd been the subject line of those calendar invites before. But there's something special about reading your own name next to HR transition discussion. 9 RAM sharp. The day before, no one said anything. Business as usual. My badge still worked. My email still pinged with requests. Hey Caleb, can you take a look at this routing error? Caleb, can you jump on a client call this afternoon? I did all of it. Calm. Polite. Because I already knew. When Friday came, I woke up early. No reason to be late for my own funeral. Made coffee in my chipped mug. Sat at my kitchen table, watching the sun crawl across the floor. I thought about staying home, just ignoring it. But I'm not that dramatic. Besides, I wanted to see it. I parked in the same spot I always did. Walked in with my sad little badge dangling from its fraying lanyard. The receptionist greeted me like it was any other day. Morning, Caleb. Morning. HR was down the hall. Small conference room. Michelle was waiting her expression somewhere between funeral director and customer service rep. She stood when I walked in. Thanks for coming in early. Like I had a choice. I sat down. She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside exit forms, boilerplate legal disclaimers so thick they could suffocate you. She started reading from a script. First of all, I want to thank you for all your incredible work on the optimization initiative. You've truly set the foundation for the next chapter of the company's success. I didn't interrupt. I just watched her mouth form words she didn't believe. She cleared her throat. Unfortunately, as you know, your role was project-based. Now that the system is live and fully operational, we're ending the contract effective immediately. Fully operational. My code. My system. But sure, operational. She offered a weak smile. This is standard. You'll have email access through the weekend. We'll collect your badge on Monday. I reached into my pocket and dropped it on the table right then. Plastic on wood. Sounded like a nail in a coffin. She blinked. Oh, okay, thank you. The pen she handed me didn't work. I had to scribble on the folder 3 times before the ink finally flowed. Classic. I signed each page carefully. Didn't ask questions. Didn't protest. I'd read every line of that contract the day I signed it. I knew exactly what it didn't say. Not a single mention of asset transfer. No IP audit. No code ownership clause. No procurement checklist for the algorithm. No line item for activation keys. They thought firing me ended my involvement. That was the funniest part. They thought it was clean. Efficient. They thought it was over. Michelle finished her speech. Closed the folder. Stood up like the meeting was over. I just want to say again, we really appreciate everything. I picked up my empty coffee cup. Stood. Nodded. Sure. I walked out without looking back. The office was quiet that early. No one watching me go. Which was fitting. They'd spent weeks acting like I wasn't there. Now they didn't have to pretend. Outside, the morning air felt sharp. I stopped at my car and looked at the building one last time. Glass and steel. Buzzwords and arrogance. They didn't even realize they'd left the keys with me. I drove home in silence. Didn't blast music. Didn't scream. Didn't punch the steering wheel. I just planned. Because I wasn't angry. Anger is messy. Anger is reactive. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was record-keeping. Accounting. Making sure the book's balanced. And if you've ever been walked out like that, hit that subscribe button. Because you'll want to hear how the rest of this goes. I didn't get drunk that night. Didn't call anyone to complain. Didn't post cryptic status updates about betrayal or corporate greed. I made coffee. Sat at my kitchen table. And started writing. Because I didn't need therapy. I needed a contract. It wasn't revenge. It was enforcement. I opened a new document on my laptop. Named it Whitaker Analytics. Licensing terms. V1.0 PDF. It looked so clean. So harmless. But every clause was a landmine. First page. Non-transferable, non-duplicable license for use of proprietary machine learning optimization system. Second page. 50,000 month payment due in advance, no refunds. Third page. 30-day renewal required. Failure to renew triggers immediate termination of functionality. Fourth page. Enforced via encrypted activation token. No manual override without licensor authorization. I sat back in my chair, sipped lukewarm coffee, watched the cursor blink at the end of the last sentence. It was perfect. Not vindictive. Not malicious. Just accurate. A precise description of the dependency they'd built without understanding it. I'd spent months writing their future. Now I was writing mine. I knew better than to think a PDF alone would scare them. Corporate legal departments treat contracts like suggestions. So I made sure it wasn't just paper. I logged into my private repo, pulled up the code for the activation module. Heartbeat renewal every 30 days. If the system didn't receive a valid key, it wouldn't crash. It would stop. Routes would fail to generate. Drivers wouldn't get updates. The entire beautiful mess would grind to a halt. Not with a bang, with silence. No sabotage, just expiration. Like forgetting to renew your domain name and watching your website vanish. I ran test after test, verified the lockout, documented the behavior, saved screenshots, archived logs. They couldn't accuse me of malicious code. It was transparent, predictable, documented. A feature, not a bug. When I was satisfied, I encrypted the module with a new key, one only I could generate. Stored the key in 3 different secure vaults. I looked at the time. 3:12 a.m. I should have been exhausted, but I felt lighter than I had in months. I emailed myself the licensing PDF. Then I closed the laptop and let out a slow breath. The system they were so proud of wasn't theirs. They didn't even know how to maintain it. They'd made themselves dependent on me without realizing it. And dependency has a price. The next day I called Sarah, old friend, now a contracts attorney with a boutique firm that specialized in IP enforcement. We hadn't talked in months, but she picked up on the second ring. Whitaker, heard you got canned. I smiled. News travels. She laughed. Especially when you leave a trail of genius-level work and pissed-off executives. We met at a quiet bar. Cheap beer. Sticky tables. The perfect place to plan legal apocalypse. I handed her my tablet. Showed her the licensing agreement. She read silently for 10 minutes. Didn't ask questions. Just scrolled, eyes narrowing at key phrases. Finally, she set it down. Jesus, Caleb, this is tight. I've had time to think about it, I said. She gave me a look. Understatement of the year. You got your LLC docs in order. I nodded. Registered, current. All code backed up in private repos. Development logs, change logs, architecture diagrams. All under Whitaker Analytics. She picked up her beer. To being unstealable, we clinked glasses. Then she got serious. You're not worried they'll just try to clone it? I shook my head. They don't have the talent. Or the time. And even if they did, Heartbeat module fails gracefully. They'd have to rebuild from scratch. By then, their clients will be gone. Sarah whistled. Cold. I love it. We sat in silence for a minute. Just the low hum of bad country music over the speakers. Finally, she asked, "You want me to send it for you?" I shook my head. Not yet. Let them enjoy their success a little longer. They'll appreciate the contrast. She smiled. God, you're dangerous. I didn't argue, because I wasn't angry anymore. Just precise. I didn't deploy it that night. Even I'm not that impulsive. I waited, watched, let them bask in their success. Press releases, investor calls, photos of smiling executives shaking hands in conference rooms with cheap art on the walls, LinkedIn posts about transformational AI solutions. I saw one VP actually write, "Proud to have led our internal team in building this cutting-edge logistics optimization platform." Internal team. I snorted into my coffee. I didn't comment. Didn't react, because I wasn't angry. Anger is noisy. Anger gets noticed. I preferred silence. Silence is permission. Silence is space to work. So I let them celebrate. Let them book new clients with promises they couldn't keep without me. Meanwhile, I worked at my kitchen table. Laptop open. Code editor glowing at 2 a.m., coffee going cold. I refined the heartbeat module. It wasn't sabotage. It was design. Every 30 days, the system would check for a valid renewal token. If it didn't get one, it wouldn't crash. No dramatic meltdown, no corrupted databases. Just nothing. No new routing predictions. No updated driver instructions. No real-time load balancing. The entire operation would freeze like a paused movie. Because that's what dependency is. It's not theft. It's lease. I wasn't taking anything from them. I was just reclaiming what was mine when the lease expired. I wrote the renewal server in Python. Lightweight. Encrypted. It would issue new tokens only if payment cleared. No token, no service. I set up a monitoring dashboard for myself. Simple. Dark mode. One line of text. Next renewal check 29 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes. Below it a countdown timer in bright red. I sat back and watched the numbers tick down. There's a specific pleasure in watching time work for you, not against you. Most people scramble when the clock runs out. I was the one who set it. They didn't know. Why would they? They never asked. They'd seen me push updates so many times that they'd stopped reading the logs, stopped asking questions. So I pushed one last commit, heartbeat module enabled, and that was it. No one reviewed it. No one flagged it. It passed tests because it was supposed to, because it was real, because it worked. I wasn't crashing their system. I was letting it expire. A difference they wouldn't understand until it was too late. That night I closed my laptop and stretched. My back popped. My shoulders ached, but I felt better than I had in months. I rinsed my coffee mug and set it on the counter. The apartment was quiet. Outside traffic hissed by in the dark. I thought about Sarah's words at the bar. God, you're dangerous. Maybe, but only to people who thought they owned me. I didn't sleep much, but I slept well. In the morning, I woke up to an email from the CTO. Just a mass congratulatory blast. Amazing work, team. We're getting rave reviews from early clients. Let's keep up the momentum. No mention of me. Of course. I marked it as read, logged into my private dashboard. Checked the timer. 29 days, 12 hours left. I sipped my coffee and smiled, because they didn't know it yet, but they were on my clock now. The best part was how quiet it got. For weeks, I heard nothing. No calls, no emails asking for tweaks or patches, no bug reports. Silence. They were too busy celebrating. I watched from the sidelines as they rolled out their new proprietary AI optimization platform to existing clients. Saw the press releases. Company name proudly announces its revolutionary in-house logistics solution. I even saw a photo of the CTO in a tailored suit shaking hands with the CEO in front of a giant screen displaying my dashboard. They didn't invite me to the launch, didn't even mention my name. Of course they didn't. They had what they wanted, or so they thought. I didn't correct them, didn't even flinch, because I didn't need them to thank me. I needed them to depend on me, and they did. They just hadn't realized it yet. I spent my days quietly, waking up early, making strong coffee in my chipped mug, opening my personal dashboard, watching the countdown timer tick away. 21 days, 16 hours, 20 days, 4 hours. 19 days flat. I didn't gloat, didn't talk trash on LinkedIn, didn't even mention it to Sarah when she called to check in. She asked, heard anything yet? I just said no, not yet, because I knew how this worked. They thought they were in the clear, thought the project was done. Meanwhile, they were onboarding new clients, sending integration guides, promising KPI improvements they couldn't deliver without me. They were betting their entire sales pitch on something they didn't own, and I just waited. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A quiet bug report I intercepted through a friend still in DevOps. Route generation taking longer than expected in 2 regions. Minor, easily ignored. But the system was warning them. Predictive accuracy started to decay ever so slightly. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to be noticed. Meanwhile, my dashboard ticked on. 17 days, 12 hours. I pictured them in their daily stand-ups, pointing fingers, blaming the dev team. Ops saying we just need a patch. Sales insisting it wasn't a big deal. No one willing to say it out loud. They didn't know how it worked. They sent out client updates with forced optimism. Minor hiccups as we scale. Nothing to worry about. I saved every one of those emails. Just for fun. Because I wasn't crashing them. I was letting entropy do its job. My code didn't sabotage. It expired. Predictably. Cleanly. And if they'd bothered to ask me about it, I would have told them, happily, for a fee. But they didn't ask, because they didn't think they had to. They'd written me out of the story, called me redundant, so I sat back, watched, drank my coffee, and waited. Because that's the thing about systems no one understands. They don't fail all at once. They rot, quietly, until one day everything stops. I checked my timer again. 14 days, 3 hours. 2 weeks left. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was compliance. Enforcing the terms. They just hadn't read the contract. But I had. Word for word. I didn't have to do anything. That was the beauty of it. I didn't sabotage their system. Didn't break in or deploy malware. I just stopped updating it. They did the rest themselves. The first real signs hit around day 10. I saw the emails forwarded to me by an old contact in their ops team. Route generation failed for East Coast region. Driver assignments duplicating in Midwest. ETA calculations showing impossible times. At first they blamed load spikes. Bad data. User error. Classic corporate move. Never the system. Never them. I pictured them crammed into their conference room with the broken projector squinting at dashboards that had gone from green to yellow. Sweating in their button-ups. Stirring burnt coffee with cheap plastic stirrers. My dashboard timer ticked on. 9 days, 14 hours. I kept sipping my own coffee, because I wasn't the one panicking. Reports got worse. Clients started calling, asking why deliveries were late, why the beautiful real-time optimization they'd been promised suddenly seemed dumb. Because that's what it was without the heartbeat renewal. Dumb. A dead brain still twitching on reflexes. Meanwhile, the system logs filled with errors. Heartbeat renewal key missing. Authorization failed. Model validation expired. They hadn't even known to look for those logs before. Now they were reading them like a priest reading last rites. My contact sent me a screenshot of their Slack channel. CTO, anyone know how to generate the renewal key? Senior Dev, what renewal key? Ops VP, are you telling me this thing needs a subscription? Junior Analyst, should we call Caleb? I laughed when I read it. Not out of cruelty, but at the predictability of it. They never asked me how it worked. Never paid for documentation. Never even asked for admin access to the renewal server. Because they didn't care. As long as it worked. And now it didn't. Clients began threatening penalties. Some of their biggest contracts had service-level agreements that promised 98% on-time delivery. They were slipping to 82%. Their sales team tried to spin it. Just a temporary integration hiccup. But you can only say that so many times before people stop believing you. I watched all this from my couch, laptop balanced on my knees, timer in one window, their LinkedIn page in another. The last post they made still bragging about their proprietary AI platform. 7 days, 3 hours. They had a week left. They tried patches, rolling back updates, swapping server instances. Nothing worked, because it wasn't a bug. It was a feature, enforced by design. Meanwhile, my code kept doing exactly what I wrote it to do. Heartbeat check. Fail gracefully. Stop accepting requests without a valid token. No corruption. No data loss. Just no new answers. They didn't even know who to blame. They tried to find someone. Anyone. Dev blamed ops. Ops blamed dev. Sales blamed product. But they all forgot about me. Until now. My contact in DevOps sent me one more message. Dude, CTO wants to know if you'll take a call. I didn't reply, because this was the part they never understood. I didn't want to break them. That would have been easy. I wanted them to understand the cost of ignoring the person who built their success. Dependency isn't theft. It's a contract. And they'd broken it. I checked my dashboard again. 6 days, 21 hours. Plenty of time. It was the call I'd been waiting for. But not rushing. I had time. They didn't. The first voicemail came on day 6. Friendly. Professional. Desperate under the surface. Hi Caleb, hope you're well. Quick question about the routing module. Just wanted to clarify some ownership details. Maybe you can give us a call back. I didn't. On my dashboard, the timer kept ticking. 6 days, 2 hours. The second voicemail wasn't friendly. It was cautious. Legal. Caleb, this is Meredith from Legal. We'd appreciate a conversation to resolve any potential misunderstandings about the intellectual property in the optimization system. Please reach out at your earliest convenience. I didn't. I knew what was happening on their end. Board meetings with raised voices. Client calls getting testy. Sales teams demanding fixes. Dev teams admitting they didn't know how it worked. Meanwhile, their shiny proprietary AI platform was choking on bad predictions. Drivers showing up late, fuel budgets exploding, customer satisfaction scores tanking. My favorite was when a contact in ops texted me a photo of a driver's route that doubled back on itself twice before finishing. Nice algorithm. I just replied with a thumbs up emoji. On day 5, they tried email. Subject urgent. IP ownership clarification. Caleb. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding regarding asset ownership. We'd like to discuss licensing options to ensure continued operational success. Please call ASAP. I didn't, because they were the ones who didn't want to talk when they fired me. They'd made their position clear. They didn't need me, except they did. By day 4, they stopped pretending. My phone rang at 7:13 a.m. An unfamiliar number, local area code. I let it ring. Voicemail kicked in. It was Mark, the VP of Ops, voice cracking like he hadn't slept. Caleb, listen. We know there's a situation here. We need you to talk to us. I'm asking you. Personally. Please. Just call me back. I made breakfast instead. Watched the timer on my dashboard. 4 days, 12 hours. Another email landed. More direct. We acknowledge your ownership claims. We're prepared to discuss licensing terms. Please respond immediately. I did. Finally. I opened a new email window. Attached the PDF. Subject line: licensing agreement, Whitaker Analytics. Body. Attached: please find the finalized licensing agreement for continued use of the optimization system. Renewal due in 4 days, 10 hours. Link to live countdown timer included. Payment terms non-negotiable. Failure to execute will result in full service lockout. Best, Caleb Whitaker. I read it twice. Clicked send. Then I went back to my coffee. Silence for a few hours. Then the real negotiation attempt started. They called, emailed, offered to find a middle ground. Said things like, let's not escalate this. We're all professionals here. Surely you don't want to hurt the company. I didn't reply to most of them. The ones I did, I copied and pasted the same line. Please review the attached licensing terms. The clock is ticking. Because I wasn't negotiating. This wasn't personal. It was contractual. They'd had their chance to value me when they had me in the building. They chose cheap. Now cheap was expensive. My favorite call was Mark again, sounding half broken. Caleb, listen, I get it. You're pissed. You're right. Okay, just name your price. I did. I pointed him to the PDF. $50,000 a month licensing. 300-hour consulting fee. 6-month minimum. Payment in advance. No NDAs. All updates remain property of Whitaker Analytics, LLC. Silence on the line. I could almost hear him sweating. Finally. Jesus. You really wrote this like a ransom note. I didn't laugh. Didn't gloat. Just said, check the clock. And hung up. My dashboard blinked. 3 days, 22 hours. Time was running out. For them. Not for me. They caved with 12 hours to spare. I was making coffee when the email landed. Subject line in all caps, executed agreement attached. They'd signed every page. Countersigned. Time-stamped. Legally binding. No apologies in the body of the email. Just 2 words. Please help. I finished pouring my coffee before I replied. Acknowledged, payment received, activation key in progress. Because that was the deal. No emotion. No friendship. Just business. I prepared the key. Encrypted. Time-limited. Traceable. They'd get 30 days. And then they'd come back. I sat back, sipped my coffee, and let it sink in. All those months ago, I was just another contractor. Badge on a fraying lanyard. Burnt out. Disposable. They thought firing me ended the transaction. They didn't realize it started one, because you can fire a person, but you can't fire what you don't own. When I walked back into that building, it wasn't with my old badge. It was with a visitor sticker. Vendor status. Temporary access. Mark met me at the door. Eyes red. Wrinkled shirt. He didn't even try to shake my hand. Just led me straight to the server room. They were all waiting. Ops team. Dev team. Legal. The CTO looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days. No one spoke at first. They just watched me plug in my encrypted drive. Is it going to work? The CTO asked, voice cracking. I didn't answer. I typed the key in silence. Hit enter. The system shuddered. Logs flooded with green text. Heartbeat verification. Renewal handshake. Routes regenerating. Driver assignments realigning. API response times dropping back to normal. One of the junior devs actually let out a choked sob. I unplugged the drive, pocketed it, turned around. They'll hold for 30 days, I said. Silence. Mark cleared his throat. Okay, thank you. I looked at them. Really looked. People who once wouldn't even invite me to the boardroom. Now couldn't look me in the eye. The CTO finally whispered, "So, see you next month." I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just adjusted my coat. "That depends," I said, "on whether you want to keep the lights on." And I walked out. I didn't wait for them to thank me. Didn't need them to, because this was the new arrangement. They didn't employ me. They leased me. They leased my brain. They could replace my badge, but not my architecture. They could erase my name from the press releases, but not the root key. They could fire me, but they couldn't fire the knowledge it took to keep them running. That's the part they never understood. I wasn't their employee. I was their dependency, and they'd pay for it, month after month, heartbeat after heartbeat, because in the end it wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure they remembered. And if you've ever wanted to make them pay attention, hit that subscribe button, because there's always another company, another contract, another heartbeat, waiting.